This is great.
We got 25 minutes. We got to go.
Hey.
Hey, yo.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hump
Camel.
day. I will get a camel on a stick. I'm determined. You will see it in September. I guarantee you.
I'm excited to be on with you guys today. Happy Wednesday, everyone.
So if you are new to our channel, welcome to Say That channel. We are excited that you're here with us today because we are excited about what we have to offer to entrepreneurs. When you're starting off and you hear those stories about how people have nothing and then they have this massive success, but it's like, what happens in the middle? What happens during that ugly come up, right? Well, that's what we do. We are unapologetic in talking about the ugly come up. What are the pitfalls to be avoided? What's the mindset that you need to have? What are the things that you need to navigate around or through? All of those things we like to talk about here on our show. And so we have 25 minutes on the clock to talk about the topic of the day. And after those 25 minutes are over, oh, too bad. No, but for those of you that are interested in hearing more, especially from our guests, we go into overtime. And so becoming one of our community members on overtime, and that link is in the description box. So that right now, if you want, you can catch the overtime segment where we go even deeper into the topic. And by being a community member, you will have access to all of the overtime videos that we've done in the past, outtakes, and depending on the level of membership, you'll even be able to tell us who you would like to be on the show, suggest a topic. And if our highest tier of membership gets personal trained by either myself or Winston. Winston also allowed for personal physical training, not just the business training, but like also is open to doing.
Let's get that body in shape, right?
You know.
And guys, if you are brand new, make sure you hit that subscribe and that like button so that the algorithms know to share this amazing content with other people. And to save my voice and to definitely just dive right into today, because today is definitely going to be a good one. Let us get to today's question. All right.
Today's question is it easy to turn your creativity into a business?
Oh, let's go. Let's go.
Can you, right? What are those creatives' minds out there? This is the question. So we are super excited because it is not just Winston and myself who are going to be talking about this. We have an amazing guest with us today. She is like the definition of a creative, literally taking ideas from her head and making them into things that are tangible that you can touch. And for all the ladies, things that like adorn us and make us feel beautiful. She is a pleasure, absolute pleasure. She just has a warmth to her with the minute you meet her that is just absolutely amazing. I am so excited to bring to our stage Malyia.
Our next guest.
Hi.
Welcome to the stage.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are super excited to have you on. We have been able, even a short period, to see some of your growth and are like super excited to jump into that and talk about what that's been like for you and to share that with so much of our audience. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your journey into being a jewelry designer. How did you get into that space? What led you there? What were you doing before?
Absolutely. So I went to Florida State University from the Bronx originally, and I studied fashion, merchandising, and product development. I thought I wanted to be in fashion. I knew I wanted to be in fashion. Let me take that back. Since I was about 4 years old, very determined to get into fashion. And I thought I wanted to be in a Wintour or a stylist. And one of my first jobs as an intern was working with Nicki Minaj when she was first getting started.
Oh, wow.
And so that was like out the gate, like, oh my gosh, it's my first styling job. But it wasn't what I expected. I thought I would be allowed to be a little bit more creative, and I wasn't, but it was a great opportunity. And then I worked in fashion for several years and realized that I just had more of a creative appetite than what I was getting at the time. So I decided to explore designing jewelry self-taught, just out of a creative itch that I had. And I made my first piece and wore it to a music festival. And from there, people just kept stopping me at the festival. It was a simple body chain, but at the time, body chains were the it accessory.
Right.
And so no one could find one that was very delicate and dainty unless they paid upwards of $14,000. Rihanna, Beyonce, everyone was wearing it, but I designed one that was unique at the time. And so I wore it to Made in America, and I just kept getting stopped. And my friends at about the fifth or sixth time was like, wait a minute, you're onto something. Like, this is like that aha moment. And so we went out to lunch. They helped me name the brand at lunch. And they're like, you should call it Made by Malyia. Like, it was all super duper, like, same day type of situation. I set up an Etsy store a couple weeks later. Didn't get my first sale for about 3 months. But once I did, it just like started to take off. And, you know, that's what has led me to where I am now.
Huh. That is fascinating. One, I think it's really fascinating that you knew since you were 4 that you wanted to be in fashion, right? And so the idea of what we wear, even if it's jewelry as an accessory instead of like an actual whole outfit, is fascinating. Like, that's amazing. And then the aha moment. That's incredible. Sorry, like a lot of people don't have that.
And you don't know that you're having it until you have it. Like, I didn't know. Like, even when my friends were saying, I was like, no, I finally found something that's mine. Like, I wanted to hold on to it. But then I was like, what do I have to lose? Like, I'm at a job that I hate. Let me try it. You know, what's the worst that could happen? I could have creative outlet and maybe design some really cool stuff. And I just kept going with it because it felt good. And I set up a website. I was invited to do Afropunk. That was what really changed the trajectory. I had my store on Etsy for a couple of months, I think about 7 months. And the creators of Afropunk sent me an email. And I was like, this must be like spam. This is no way this is real. Because I knew Afropunk, I attended prior to. And that really changed it for me and made it like a serious business venture. And it really took off from there. It was like I started at a music festival. I end up at a music festival at my first pop-up shop. I get so much support. I return the following year. Then I do Essence Fest, and it just like snowballed.
Wow. Yeah. So tell us, okay, so it sounds like you had a full-time and you were doing this on the side or your part-time gig. And it sounds like I understand where the flip happened and then this went away. But what were you doing while you were?
Yeah, I was a buyer in fashion. So I stayed the course in fashion because I could not let go of this passion that I had for it. But I just wasn't getting the recognition in the company that I was working for. And I just felt starved creatively. And I kept asking for more opportunities to be creative. And what happened was, funny enough, I do Afropunk. I get featured by Vogue for my like street style and my jewelry. And my company at the time, I don't tell them, and they see the article and I'm on like the front page of it. And they're like, now all of a sudden, all these creative opportunities come about. And they're like, oh, we want to feature you. We want to do this. What ideas do you have for us? And I'm like, interesting.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. And I resigned 2 months later. Like, I'm out. Like, bye. So it's funny how that happened.
Was that a financial decision, or I don't want to say spite, but kind of like y'all missed it?
It was a little bit of both. I had the feeling that it was time to move on. I had an opportunity to send jewelry to Jasmine Sullivan. She was doing a night show in New York, and I was at work. And I was like, man, I really want to do this. And I was like, I'm just going to fake being sick and go home. Like, I have to get this piece to Jasmine Sullivan. Like, there's no way I'm missing out on this.
Yeah.
And I left early. I went, got the piece, brought it to Jasmine. She wore it on the show. That helped, you know, she posted it. It got so many, like a lot of my followers now are from that post that she did. And I just was really willing to take the risk. So when I resigned a couple months later, it just made the most sense. I was like, this job is in the way. And I know that I'm on to something. So let me follow this.
That is good.
That's amazing. So the pink elephant in the room, there's a lot of people listening to you and they're like, but like that seems kind of risky, right?
Yes, it's very risky. It's very risky. It's very risky. And for a minute there, I was, what do they say? Like I was building my plane on the way down. It was very much so a leap of faith for me. I had been feeling very stuck for a very long time, for about 4 or 5 years. I just was like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I'm looking for opportunities and I was getting the doors like slammed in my face left and right. And I'm like, but this jewelry has been consistently good for me. Like people, even if I'm not making hundreds of $1,000s in sales, I'm getting recognition. I'm getting Essence Fest inviting me to exhibit. I'm getting Afropunk inviting me to exhibit. I clearly am creative and people are attracted to something that I'm doing. So if I'm not getting a job, but I'm creating a job for myself, why am I so against it? Because I don't have the things that I think I might need, like capital, right? So I had to be creative. I had to start where I was. I cashed out my 401k. I did things that are risky, but I had to because I trusted enough of myself, and like that 4-year-old self was like, this is something you've known about yourself. You knew you were creative. You always were. You didn't know, you thought it was fashion because that's what you were drawn to. You read a lot of magazines, you did a lot of cutouts. I used to style my dolls and sketch different, my mom still has the books. I sketched at like 4 or 5 years old. So it's like, you just have to go for it. And if it doesn't work, you tried something different. So it's always going to be a risk involved. If there's no risk, there's no reward. But I was willing to take that risk and it has paid off.
So can I ask, what does it doesn't work look like? Because for me, I'm listening to the period. I mean, this sounds like a story you wouldn't hear normally. I have this Etsy site up for a couple months, 7 months, I think you said, and then a super or a star happens to see, buy, and like my stuff. But what would it have looked like? Because here's the thing that fascinates me is I'm wondering why you didn't keep the job when they opened up the door for opportunities for you, and ultimately you decided to just bet on yourself when you seem like you finally got what you wanted, even in that space. Like you were getting the things. Like, was it limiting? Would it have limited your business to stay on board, or?
I think for me, it was a bit of like, I've been here for so long and it took this for you to finally see what I have already told. It was definitely, it was spite a little bit, but it also was like, I still was capped out creatively. Like they couldn't provide that level of creativity that I wanted. And it would have been limited. It would have been for a short window. And then I would have went back to doing what I was doing. They weren't willing to create the opportunity that I was willing to create for myself. So it just, I outgrew the position and the company. And so I it's one of those things that, when you said, what does it look like not to make it or for it not to work out? I think you don't see that unless you give up. Like if I had given up, because there were times, right, where like it doesn't look like what it looks like now. Now it looks very shiny. All my friends and family, they're like, oh, I see what you were envisioning when you were a very small scale. Like, and I'm still growing. I still consider myself emerging. But they couldn't see when I was setting up for Afropunk, like, oh no, this is going bigger. Like there's collaborations coming. Because it was in its infancy stages outwardly, but in my mind, I was like, oh, this is that idea I had when I was 4 or 5 years old, like to build something bigger. So it would have looked like just not completing the goal, not completing the mission. And I'm not willing to do that. I'm always willing to pivot, always.
To keep going. Okay.
Okay, if you're out there watching, please let us know if you're getting that, because I feel like there's so much already. Put a fire emoji, a V value. Please let us know. Yes. And if you have questions, please also put that in the comments. We certainly want to make sure that Malyia gets the opportunity to answer your questions. So, okay. The other thing that I was thinking as you were talking, right, like the scale up. So you talked about how like family didn't really see it, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to that. Like in the very beginning, when things just, oh, there we go, fire.
Thanks, Jeannie.
When things first start off, it's yeah, like you don't get the support necessarily from the people who you think you're going to get the support from, with like, you know, your closest family members, maybe even some of your closest friends, because they can't see the vision. That is a very common process that I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, including ourselves, have definitely gone through. And then there's the scale, right? So it's like, okay, you know what? I see the vision, I know where I'm going, and then you continue. So you forge on and you start off on Etsy. How did you decide your price points? Like, how does that even begin? And then,
Absolutely.
of course, the decision to then keep.
Yeah. Right. So when I first started on Etsy, it was a passion project. It wasn't, again, I still wasn't fully sold on the idea of it being a business. And so I just was so excited that people were even interested. Like when my store got a favorite or a like or an inquiry, I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's somebody out there who sees what I see. And so the price points were very attainable and introductory because I wanted to keep it accessible, because that's why I started. I started because I couldn't afford that $20,000 body chain.
Right.
So I wanted to make it, you know, it was very affordable. My first piece, I think, was under $60. And I just wanted to just learn as I went along. So it was a passion project. I was self-taught. I was teaching myself as I went along, and you know, leaning on people in the industry, finding manufacturers. Like I was doing all of that at the same time that I was like getting inquiries and orders. So that was my process, was just going along with what people were asking for. People would ask me, could you make a ring for me? Could you make an earring for me? And I'm like, what would you like it to look like? I was really building it off of what the clients were asking to see from me.
How do you decide? Because one of the things, and I've seen, whether it's like posts or just comments, people who are creatives like you share about what level, like how you see yourself and what you know you bring to the table and how you put a value to that. You know, your pieces are unique because it's, again, from your mind, right? And I always wondered, when you're in a space like that, just coming from like a sales background, there are usually certain set prices with things. But when you're the one that designs things, it's like, how do you price? I'm just getting started from, but I know my stuff is good, right? Like, how do you bridge that gap? And then how do you, and just for, again, people who are on here who may be in this space, when did you decide to up the price? You know what I mean? Like if you were finding better materials or however, because in my mind, I'm like, Jasmine Sullivan, like, I need to, like, what did I tell you I charged you again? Like in my mind, it's like, how did you, because you got these stars from early on, it seems. So how did you decide on all that?
Yeah. So when I started out, I knew I wanted to create an attainable, accessible jewelry collection. But I also come from a luxury background. Again, when I was 4, I was looking at all those very luxurious magazines, and I just aspired to wear the quality of clothing that I saw on those magazines. So even when I studied fashion merchandising and product development, I studied the luxury of fashion. So I studied fashion history and quality control, and I'm very into quality products. Always have been. My mom shopping for me for school was always fun because my budget probably only got me 2 items, but I didn't care because I knew that my 2 items were going to hit, and they did hit all the time. I was like best dressed. But it was important to me always to provide quality product. And so as I've grown the brand, you know, I've had to elevate my price point, which has caused me some discomfort because I want to make sure I'm still offering product that is introductory price points, but I know that I see my brand collaborating with like a Tiffany or, you know what I mean? So it's, the recent collaboration I did with Banter, which is a store that's based in 500 malls across the country, gave me that opportunity to provide quality but attainable jewelry. The price point started at about $50 to $100. And so it allowed people to see great product at an affordable price point. So I'm finding ways to be creative in that because I don't want to alienate the people who
price point. Nice.
Exactly. That's why I started. I love jewelry. I love stacking. And if one piece was too expensive, how can I do that? So that's always been very important to me. But as I elevate, I have trunk shows coming up with luxury retailers in Tribeca. And, so I'm finding a way to speak to my core audience and the people who were there with me when I started, but also help them elevate with me as I grow, which allows me to then provide even more creative designs. So I can create creative designs, but then still give them something fun and attainable at the same time. So I've found my niche in the fact that I want to speak to both audiences, even though a lot of my mentors are like, pick which one you want to go with. I'm like, I don't have to choose. I can do both. Trust me on this.
Oh, see, I love that. I think too often we rush into trying to find a niche when we can kind of slowly let it kind of take you there on its own. Right?
Awesome. Absolutely.
I do want to share this. Boom.
Your level of self-awareness throughout your journey, Malyia, is amazing. Knowing what you wanted based on the opportunity you had, knowing your worth. Thanks, Jeannie. Yeah, Thank
you.
Trusting yourself to take the risk. Very inspiring. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Brittany says, I love that, Malyia.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you all so much. That means a lot.
So that is super helpful. It's almost like an abundant mindset too, right? To think like, oh, I don't have to choose one. Like I really can do both, like in a really great way. And I love how, like you said, you're bringing those who were there with you from the beginning, you're bringing them with you along the journey towards higher end things. And I think that says a lot, right? Like that says a lot about like the community that you're trying to build with, right? It kind of is a testimony to even how you started. You're like, well, what do you want? I can do it. Like, tell me a little bit about what you want.
Right. Absolutely. And I've had clients who shopped with me at Afropunk who were getting married and reached out to me like, hey, could you potentially design my engagement ring or my wedding band? So they've grown with me. It's possible to do it. You just have to speak to them in a way where they know what you're capable of doing.
That's beautiful.
It really is. Did you have something to say?
I was going to say, before we move on to, I know we're looking low on time. I do want to connect people who are watching now with you. Let me get your social media, everything set up.
Well, as he's getting that set up, so I want everybody to know about one of the newest things that's happened to you. I mean, you kind of like hinted at it, but like let everybody know the big thing that just recently happened for you in terms of like your journey.
Yes. So are we the Banter and Tierra Whack collaboration? Okay. Yes. So I recently had the phenomenal opportunity to collaborate with Banter, which is a company owned by Signet Jewelers. They are, yes, that's me going into the mall in the Bronx, where I'm from, and seeing the collaboration. That was like a highlight of my career to this date because my family was there and they got to see something tangible in like a very large scale. Like it's in 500 malls across the country. And I had the opportunity to collaborate with Tierra. I had the opportunity to meet Tierra. She is a joy. Aww. And she's so creative, and like being able to be a creative and meet another creative and create a project together was a dream come true. And, you know, it really lends itself to show that a successful collaboration can happen between two creatives from two different industries coming together for a common product. So I'm very, very, very fortunate for that project.
That is amazing.
Thank you.
If you guys want to reach out to Malyia, there's her Instagram. She's a real person. You can reach out to her. She'll respond.
I will.
And from her Instagram, you can find her Linktree and obviously Banter. You can also go to Banter and find some of her stuff. Oh, yes. Bringing it up. Okay, awesome.
Yes.
So on her site, so one of the things that I was looking at were your pieces around the theme of like the zodiac.
Yes.
Those are really pretty.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I'm very inspired by nature, zodiac, the moon phases, astrology. So you'll see those themes a lot in my work. You'll see a lot of nature and architecture. I like to reimagine anything I've seen, I've experienced. I travel a lot. So you'll see a lot of that in anything that I've done. You're able to identify like, that looks like a Malyia piece.
This is amazing.
Thank you.
Well, as we're getting, so a couple of things. I'm like, I don't even know if we even really answered the question. Is it easy to turn your creativity into a business?
No, but you totally can. It's not easy. It's not easy because you have to, as a creative, you have so many ideas. And so you have to hone in on that thing that just feels right. And it's hard to identify what that is until you're doing it. And it's something that you're passionate about and that you'll be able to do even if the people aren't on board yet. You'll still be passionate enough to get people to see your vision. So it's not easy, but it's totally possible, and it can be a lucrative business. You just have to stay the course. So yes and no.
First the no, then the yes.
Yes.
Well, something I wanted to, I guess, get into, and maybe we'll, depending on time, but how do you deal with, and again, to me, would you say your success is unusual in a sense? Like I'm not going to say fast because I don't know if this is fast. Like how many years before the thing with the 500 stores, when did that happen? Was that this
year? This was in July.
Yeah, right.
And July was also my 8-year anniversary.
There we go.
Yeah,
building this.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at this, I guess space would 8 years? Oh, well, there we go. would you say it's realistic to think that you could be in store? Someone could be in stores. I don't know the scale to which I could be in a store within 8 years. Is that a normal kind of timeline, or no, you're like, nah, you really have to have a mindset like this could take 10, 15, you know what I mean? Like how do you guys get it? Like where do you get that from? Like how do you know how long it's going to take you to build?
And it depends, right? Like me, I'm self-funded, bootstrapped, have no connections to the industry, first generation jeweler. Like my industry is very generational. And so I had a lot of connections that I had to make before I could get to this point. But someone could possibly do it sooner if they had those connections or they were in the right place at the right time. So it just depends on your intentions as a jewelry designer or whatever industry you're in. Mine, I'm all about slow and steady because I trust that I'm going to get there and I trust that I'm going to stay there. So I'm okay with waiting 10 years for it to happen because I know when it happens, it's going to be like, wow. So I'm more patient because I'm persistent in my patience than someone else. Someone might be impatient and be like, I want it in a year, and they could do it in a year. So.
But you believe that could be the biggest drawback is just not being willing to go through what this looks like.
Exactly, because I do think that, certain things can happen really quickly, but they can also fade very quickly. And so what I've been about on my journey is slow and steady growth. I've had investors approach me like, oh, we could take your brand to this amount of X amount. And it didn't feel authentic to me. And so I passed on those because I trust that what I've built is sustainable over time and I will get there over time. So it depends on what type of growth you want. If you want quick growth, you can do that. But
okay.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. All right. I have some other questions myself. So in overtime, I would love to talk a little bit more about mentorship because I feel like as entrepreneurs, sometimes we just want to do it ourselves. We don't want to hear from anybody else. And so I would love to hear what that process is like for you. That's a second alarm. As we go into overtime, that is what we'll be talking about. Okay. So if you are not already a community member of ours on Patreon, now's the time. Go down to the description because we're about to hop right over into overtime and get started right away so we could really, really get to some really good juicy bits from Malyia. Thank you so much for being with us today.
This was really good.
really, really good. And I know it's bringing a lot of value to a lot of people. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'll see you all in overtime.
Yes, you will. All right, guys.
As
As
always,
always,
remember, you
you
deserve
deserve
the good
the good
life.
life.
Say
I
that.
love that.
I will
I
see
love
you guys
that.
in a couple minutes.